I literally had owned 5 blocks of apartments. 3 weeks into COVID, the government announced that you couldn't evict tenants, and tenants didn't have to pay their rent. Now my tenants don't have to pay rent, but I've still got to pay the bank. How's that going to work?
How did you then go into these different deals to inspire the listener to go, you know what, if she could do that, I could do that too?
Yeah. So in COVID,
Robyn Hills is an Australian property developer and creative entrepreneur who uses her strong design background to transform real estate into innovative, high-impact developments.
She focuses on integrating art and architecture with an emphasis on affordable housing and visually distinctive projects.
At 22, bought my first block of units at Machado, proceeded to renovate them. In 4 months, made more money on that little reno flip than I did in an entire year of working 6.5 days a week.
Got a decent $500,000 uplift. How did that come about? Why did you buy it? How did you get that uplift?
So in order to fund my charity project, I actually need more income. And because...
What is the purpose? Why are you doing this? Because it has to be bigger than you. You guys seem like you're living a pretty good lifestyle. Is that Children's Hospital is what really driving you right now to keep going?
Yeah, I want to give back. And not being able to have my own children, it's a way of doing it.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Unemployable podcast. Today we have another property podcast, and we have one of Carson's personal friends here. Her name is Robyn Hills. Now, Robyn, like a lot of us, had a major issue during COVID. What happened was she had a very successful photography business that was cash flowing, a lot of different deals that she was doing, and the cash flow literally stopped. The day of that the PM announced the pandemic, she was settling on a property that she then sold, no open houses, 3 crashed contracts, and sold it at a loss. But she took that money, put it into other projects, and since then she's done about 15 projects. And today we're going to unpack some of those projects. We're going to dig deeper into her story and give you guys some inspiration on how she did it and how you guys can do it as well. Just want to say thank you so much for being on, Robyn.
Thanks for having me.
Carson, how long have you known Robyn for now?
We were in some of the same circles, some of the communities we were bouncing around in, and would have been 2021, I think it was, when we started rubbing shoulders. And so I've always, admired what she's been doing. She was well and truly ahead of me when I was, trying to find my way. So it was good to, be inspired by people like Robyn. So it's good.
It's amazing the people you get to meet when you're kind of going to those events and those networking groups. And I know you guys have shared some stages with some of the successes that you guys have had. And then sitting here 5 years later on a podcast, going back and talking about some of those successes and some of the failures at the same time, right? Like that one during COVID. So I guess tell us a little bit first about yourself, a little bit of your background. Obviously, I know you left school at 14, which is quite interesting. We'll unpack some of these deals.
When I was about 10 or 12, I announced to the world that I wanted to earn a living out of art. And of course, well-meaning people told me that there's no rich artists. Most of the rich artists are dead. That wasn't a very good option. And my parents said I could leave school as long as I had a job. So I was on the sunny coast, finished school on Friday, started work on Monday in an accountancy office doing bookkeeping. Not very creative, but it turned out they were pretty good skills to have, because at 20, after trying to get a job in photography, no one would give me a job. They told me I was a girl. Back then you were allowed to say things like that. There was an apprenticeship going at the local newspaper. They said, you're the best person for the job, but we're not going to give it to you because you're a girl. You're going to grow up, get married, have children. All our training's going to be wasted. And I went, right, well, I'll just open my own business. So there. So at 20, I had to go get a bank loan. That was tricky because the bank manager said, no, we can't give a 20-year-old a bank loan. I'll give you $10,000 to buy a new car, but not a bank business loan.
At least they gave you the loophole.
And then I had to go lease the premises, renovate the premises for a photography studio. So 20. I opened my own business. It went gangbusters. It was really cool. I was working 6.5 days a week and pretty quickly worked out it was going to be good income, nice car, nice holidays, tax deductible conferences everywhere in the world. Yeah. But it was never going to build me wealth. And at the time, pre-internet, yes, I'm that old, there were all the people that had wealth were from property. So I started going to property seminars, and the spruikers from America were talking about always buy multiples. And if you buy one investment house, it's generally either negatively geared, and then your tenant leaves, you've got no one paying your mortgage. Whereas if you buy multiples, you've got 4, one tenant leaves, you've got 3 of them still paying your mortgage. So that's what I did at 22, bought my first block of units at Machado and proceeded to renovate them. Clueless, completely clueless. And in 4 months made more money on that little reno flip than I did in an entire year of working 6.5 days a week.
It's funny you say that, because off camera, I was talking to Carson, and just before this podcast, and he's like, he was doing calculations and going, I've never done this calculation before. Do you mind me?
No, go for it.
And he goes, the project that we're just settling now, the money I'm going to make from that project would be me working 17 years straight on my job that I left to start my property development career. 17 years.
Wow.
Right. And it's not just 17 years. I broke it down. It's 148,000 hours of work. Right. And it's the same thing, right? Like, it's people, I've been saying that a good job or a good business isn't good enough anymore. And as you can see with your business, even though it was great cash flow and you're, going on holidays and doing all these things and the fancy cars and still afford to buy, 4 flats, it still wasn't going to create the wealth that you needed.
Yeah.
But I think that one thing you have here is, right, what is your drive? And I think everyone needs to start with this, right? Well, what is the purpose? Why are you doing this? Because it has to be bigger than you. And your drive is to build a children's hospital in Cambodia, which I find quite interesting. So is that what you've done? 15 projects. I mean, we were talking off camera, you're a pilot, you fly helicopters. You guys seem like you're living a pretty good lifestyle. Is that children's hospital is what really driving you right now to keep going?
Yeah, I want to give back. And not being able to have my own children, it's a way of doing it. Cracks me up every time. Yeah. And I've volunteered in other communities. I've volunteered in Africa. I've volunteered in Aboriginal communities in Central Australia. And through one of our other property communities, came across a project in Cambodia. And so they're building Raw Impact, building a village out of bamboo. So every year I go and volunteer there. We build a house, give it to a family that's been rescued off the slum. And so I thought, great idea, let's build some medical, because you're building a village. They're going to actually, once they actually have somewhere to live, the next biggest issue is their health. Yeah, so slowly, small steps. But I've adopted, so I've gone to the closest town where they're building the village, and I've adopted their little medical centre. So we've bought them new birthing beds and hospital desks and equipment and medical supplies. And this year we're talking about building an extra 2 rooms. So it might be a slow burn, but it's started.
Congratulations. That's amazing. Not many people do that. Most people are buying Lamborghinis and, European holidays and the rest of it, not even thinking about, the bigger purpose, right? And this is a reminder for everyone. Everyone on this panel has a bigger purpose. I still haven't done what Shannon's is or Carson's. We haven't went that deep, but really appreciate you being vulnerable and letting us know that. Because there's times where it's not easy, obviously, doing what you're doing in the property development space, especially, like you've renovated retail shops, you've renovated penthouses, knockdown rebuilds, high-end duplexes, subdivisions. You've done a lot of different things. And what I'd like to do is unpack, I think, some of these projects, right? Because a lot of the listeners are starting to realize that their job or their business isn't good enough, or that one investment property that, they think is going to change their life isn't going to change their life anymore. And we teach people how to manufacture growth and how to manufacture equity. So that way you're not working for 17 years, you're making that same money in 2 years, as an example, and like what you did in 1 year. Hey guys, if you're getting value from this podcast, make sure you check out our 11-part series where we break down everything about property development and how you can get started. Click on the link in the description to get your 11-part series now. Now let's get back to the episode. So let's unpack some of those first deals. You've obviously bought those 4 flats during the time when you're, pre-COVID photography studio. So how did you then go into these different deals? And let's break down some of them. We won't go through all 15, but let's break down the ones that you think would be the most relevant to inspire the listener to go, you know what, if she could do that, I could do that too.
Yeah. So in COVID, my studio got closed because it was a face-to-face business. And I literally had, at that point, owned 5 blocks of apartments. But then 3 weeks into COVID, the government announced that you couldn't evict tenants, and tenants didn't have to pay their rent, which was a triple whammy for me because I have no income. Now my tenants don't have to pay rent, but I've still got to pay the bank. How's that going to work? Then finally JobKeeper kicked in. I did ring the bank manager because I always want to be proactive about communication and who you are responsible to. And he said, Robyn, is it dire? And I went, what do you mean? He went, for example, I've got a restaurateur in Brisbane with 2 restaurants, 200 staff. They've got leases, they've got fridges and freezers full of food that they can't sell. That's dire. And I went, okay, thanks for the perspective. No, I'm all good at the moment. He said, call back if you need to. So 3 weeks later, the government actually kicked in with JobKeeper. And out of my 25 tenants, there was only one that didn't pay rent for 3 weeks because she worked in hospitality.
Yeah.
And I said, it's okay. We'll work our way through it. And as soon as JobKeeper kicked in, everyone paid their rent. And including, weirdly, I got paid JobKeeper as well because my business was closed.
It saves a lot of people and a lot of businesses, that JobKeeper.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Whether people liked it or not, it would be a totally different country, I think, if that didn't kick in. I don't know that we'll be paying for it, and we are paying for it now, but it's got to come from somewhere, right?
Sure.
So how did...
So I pivoted. I knew I needed to buy some income. And I had for years dicked around the edges of looking at commercial properties and just never quite knew enough about it. I kind of got to nearly contract stage and then backed out of it. And I go, oh man, of all those deals that I didn't do in commercial, how do I? But anyhow, that's how it is. So I thought, well, it's definitely going to make me do it now. And part of the property group that we're in, I was introduced to a buyer's agent. They had 8 retail shops at Townsville. And I went, cool, Townsville's far enough away from the pandemic, so it's probably not affecting them too much. And it fitted my criteria. It had 2 street frontage. It had 2 vacancies, so there was upside. It was pretty ugly and run down. And several of the tenants didn't have current leases. They were just on holding over leases. So we agreed. I thought I was buying it at about 9 or 10% return because I had no clue of what I was doing. And turns out it was about a 5% return initially. And so I'd actually talked to each of the tenants and said, if I buy it, will you sign a new lease? No, because the last landlord was really poor, treated them very poorly, didn't look after the property, and they wanted to see if I was going to be a good landlord. If I was going to be a good landlord, then they would sign a new lease with me. So when the bank did their overview of everything, they had this conversation as well. Can you go get a letter of intent from these tenants? And I went, I can if that's a requirement for finance, but I prefer not to because of all these reasons. I need to be a good landlord. And I'd be short selling myself to sign them up on a lease now. And he went, oh, okay then. He shook my hand and said the loan's approved. So that was great too. That was Judo Bank, and they actually assess a loan apart from the numbers on the person's character.
But when you say 9-10% lease, yield, what was it the outgoings that caught you, or what was the
Yes, so I read all the leases personally. So even though I also got the lawyers to read the leases, I read everything. And yeah, so in the leases it said there was outgoings being recovered. But in actual fact, I think there was some dodgy cash deal going on with the landlord and the tenants on a Friday afternoon. So none of it was being documented anywhere. So I had to go in, do a full budget for all the outgoings, learn about that pretty quickly, and then start renovating. So fixing all the potholes in the driveways, fully paint the building, clean up the empty tenancies, get them new advertising, get photos. Yay, someone I can do. And talk to each of the tenants. What do they need? What do they want? Lighting need to be fixed. It's Townsville. We need more security lighting on at night. The previous landlord had gone and turned them all off to save a bit of money on the outgoings. So once I tidied all of that up, then we could get new leases for everybody and document the outgoings properly. And I had to bring them all up to market rent. Some of them we had to, rather than just jump them from $15,000 a year to $20,000 a year, which is a big jump for a small business, we had to step up the leases, so in fixed increments rather than just 3 or 4% increases. So, yeah, I learned a lot quickly.
Was that before any renovations at that time? This was just you kind of just bringing it back up to a certain standard?
So I had to do all the renovations first to then be able to fill the 2 vacancies. That was and because I actually said to the ones that had the holding over leases, I went, but you're in jeopardy of the landlord saying to you, you can leave in a month's time. You have no tenancy security. And they went, no, he's not going to do that. There's 2 vacant shops. And I went, oh, okay.
Interesting.
They're right. So, so I had to renovate the property, and then I concentrated on filling the 2 vacancies. And I learned a lot about tenancy mix. So it would have been really easy to put another 2 food shops in there, but there was already a really good pie shop, a really good coffee shop, and a corner store. And so you don't want too many food shops because that just dissipates then all the food offerings. So then I had to find other shops that had a good mix that supported each other.
Did you offer any incentives to get groups in there, or was there enough demand where you managed to get those other 2 shops filled?
It goes over the 5 years of having them. It goes in fits and starts of what you have to do to get a tenant over the line. So the biggest criteria was to renovate, to make it look appealing for people to even want to bring their business there. So some of them we gave them like a $2,500 tile allowance, that type of thing. So they had to put in the tiles, use a professional tiler. They couldn't do it themselves, and send me the invoicing, and then we paid it.
Why Townsville? I'm trying to connect the dots, right? Like you're part of a property group. You're doing your photography. You got COVID, and you want to look at some income. Where did Townsville come from? And those specific 8 commercial lots. The reason why I'm asking these questions is, like, I think a lot of people get into the analysis paralysis, and they're looking at things for weeks upon months, and then years go by and they haven't done anything. So how did you press the trigger on those 8, and why Townsville, and how did that deal actually come to fruition?
So mainly from this buyer's agent. So I had a very specific criteria of what I wanted and what I was looking for. And he knew this property, and it had actually fallen over twice already because the vendor was so difficult to deal with. And so when I came along, it was like, well, here, this one. And so I liked it because Townsville was big enough. It was growing. There's a very strong army base there that for Australia's security that they keep ramping up and bringing 500 people. So when they say we're adding 500 people to the army base in Townsville, that's actually 500 families coming to town. So
A lot more than 500 people.
Yeah, so it has demand. And it's a big enough community to be self-sufficient.
You mentioned specific criteria. Where did that specific criteria come from, and what were some of those criteria, if you don't mind us asking?
For sure. So it's following on from my very early multiples, that it has to be multiples. This particular property was 8, and it was better block. So at any point it can be starter title. I like exit strategies as well. And it's on 2 lots. So I could actually split the 2 lots into 4 and 4. And it was on 2 street frontage. And literally I could probably build another story on top of it being better block, and then put some housing on the top of it. So multiple strategies, and you're not beholden to any one tenant.
Yep.
And there's always someone coming and going in those small businesses. So the other criteria was because of COVID. So I wanted a hairdresser. So you physically had to go into the shop. They weren't businesses that could pivot to online sales and, we don't need a premises anymore. So the hairdresser's been there for 15 years. The dentist has been there for 17 years. Coffee shops. Yeah. So even in COVID, people could still run in and pick up a good coffee.
And that product mix is important, right? Like people are going to go get their haircut, and while they're getting their haircut, we'll go grab a coffee. We'll then go grab a fruit shop, as an example, grab a pie on the way home, all these different types of things. Like you start looking at shopping centers, like shopping center traffic is down, right? And in my opinion, will continue that way unless they do something, out of the ordinary. But that's why they're trying to bring in a lot of big gyms, as an example, because all of a sudden you got 5,000 members that are walking through those doors. And while they're there, they'll also go to Woolies, or they'll go to, walk around the shops, as an example, and go buy other things. So that tenancy mix, would be very, very important. You mentioned strata titling. Can you explain for the viewers that don't know what that means? So you bought a block of 8 units under one title, right?
Title.
So one title, 8 units, that, right, X amount of price that you paid for. And then strata titling, what does that actually mean to reduce that risk of selling?
So you can actually split it into 8 titles. So the land can be split into 2 titles. So then we could sell those 4 blocks on each title. So you end up with 2 titles if you split the land. And if you wanted to actually split then further 8 individual tenancies.
Yeah.
So one of the owners recently said, "Can I buy my shop off you?" And I went, "No." Because that's not my strategy right at the moment.
Yes.
But yes, if that was, then we could do that. So then you have to form a body corporate to overall manage. So the outgoings, we're managing the budget for that at the moment. And because it's retail shops, there's quite a lot of legislation around that. You have to actually audit the outgoings. You can't just make up all your outgoings and say, "Here, tenants, you have to split this between you." It actually has to get audited at the end of the year and adjusted up or down of whether they've over or underpaid the outgoings. Yeah. And so the same, if you had a strata title, then you start a community management scheme, and there's an outgoings budget, and then there's a little committee that would run that, and the shop owners could be committee members and the president as well.
Imagine if you didn't have to get audited, and all of a sudden you just got, putting your outgoings at whatever you want.
Well, outgoings matching the rent.
Yeah. Hey, honey, where do you want to go this year?
One of my tenants just last week when I was in Townsville said to me, "What do I get for all these outgoings?" And I said, "There's a full list that gets supplied to you. You know where the outgoings are being spent."
Yeah, I mean, everything's gone up so much, right?
Yeah.
The energy costs and the rest of it. And I own some commercial properties, the same thing. Like every year it just goes up. It's just the way it is. Insurance goes up, the levy goes up, the electricity goes up, everything just
Land tax goes up.
Land tax, everything.
Yeah. Well, and land tax you can't claim if it's retail. So that's one to watch out for. So if you buy industrial sheds, you can actually, and your tenant, you can actually add land tax to that.
Yep.
So
and in retail you can. So that's big cash flow, right? Because obviously land tax is not cheap.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
That's strata titling. Sorry, Shant.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really like the exit strategy, how you considered turning them all into a body corporate to sell down your debt risk if you needed to. Like you could split 4 off, get rid of them, hold the last 4 or 2 so you own them next to nothing. It's what a lot of people should be looking at when they're going into a project, not just looking at the big headline number at the end, I can make X or I'm going to get X rent. It's what if it all goes wrong, how can I step out of it, which is really important.
Yeah.
It's not only that as well, it's yes, you can do it to sell it, but you can also do it to actually get that equity out, which I'm sure what you've done. You get it valued at the end because, like you say, if you were to strata tile it, a lot of the time you can buy, you got a smaller pool of buyers, so you're going to get a higher yield if you've got a big shopping centre. But if you strata tile it, you might buy it on an 8% net yield, and all of a sudden you're selling it at a 6% net yield. And by fixing up those outgoings and getting them included, and by renovating, you're just stacking strategies on top of each other. And by the end of the day, you've got this nice uplift for this building. So, and I know a lot of people have done the commercial, they can turn that around pretty quickly. Like in a 6-month period, there's been awesome examples of people going 30, 50%, 100% uplift on the, just by reletting it, fixing up the leases, tidying up a little bit. And all of a sudden you pull out that equity and you go again, and you got a cash flow positive asset at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
because your rents are also increasing, so it's kind of a two-edged sword. You can increase the value of the property, but also because your rents are increasing, then you get uplift on
Correct.
refinancing that way. So I've refinanced them recently, and they've pretty much doubled in value from when I bought them 5 years ago. So, and it's cash flow positive. So
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Winner.
Yeah.
I want to break down, because some people don't understand yields. Like it's very confusing for people to say, I sell it at 8% and I get a cheaper price than if I sell it at 6%, as an example, right? So I just want to break down how that works, guys. So if you take a calculator, for those of you guys that don't know, and you take $200,000 worth of income as an example, this isn't outgoings or anything, just a very, very basic calculation, right? And you divide that number by 8%, that gives you a retail value on that building, as an example, of $2.5 million at an 8% yield. Now 2% doesn't sound like a lot, right? But if you take 200,000 and you divide that by 6% yield, right, you've got 3.333 million, right? So call it 3.3 million. So because of a 2% better yield, your actual asset is now $800,000 more. And in the commercial space, in the retail space, it's all worked off yields. And Adam, who is a partner in Unemployable, he was selling stuff in Burley during COVID at 3% yields. And that's where, you do that calculation at 3% and it just goes through the roof. And this is where, people like Robyn are coming in and buying these, unrenovated, rundown commercial premises, retail premises. You can do this with industrial and spruce them up the rent. And then obviously when you're upping the rent and you're buying them when they're at $500 a week and they have no leases, but really your retail rent is supposed to be $800 a week. And all of a sudden you have leases. The banks like leases. The banks don't like not having leases. And then all of a sudden it's valued, if you pay $2 million for something and all of a sudden it's valued at 2.8 million. And then you knock on Judo's door and go, hey, I want to refinance, right? And I want to refinance 70% of the 2.8. And then all of a sudden you've got money in your hand. And that's kind of how it works, in layman's terms, really. There's a lot more to it. But.
And there's been another really interesting thing that I've learnt, I'm happy to share, is with revaluations. So if you're with a bank, they will appoint, or they will go and get you a couple of quotes for valuers, and you can just choose one of those. Most people would choose the cheapest one because they can vary by a couple $1,000s. And we don't like spending money unnecessarily. But I kind of by default came across this because I was also buying another property at the time. And we needed a specialist industrial shed valuer was what was asked for. So I found one of those and I went, oh, well, we need valuations on these as well. Can you give me a quote on them? Yes. So now I was employing the valuer because we didn't have a final bank fix. We wanted to get the valuations, then go back to 2 or 3 banks that we kind of selected that would fit our criteria. But because I was dealing with the valuer, he actually sent me a draft valuation. And I rang him and I said, hey, can we talk about this? Because I noticed you've used these numbers when actually you should be using these numbers. And this is what's happened here, here, and here. And I'm just querying why you're using that as a comparable. And one of them was the comparable sales were 6 to 8% yield. But another valuer had previously used a 9% yield for my property. I went, why are you doing that? So I've always held valuers in such awe that I didn't think I could ever query them. And then all of a sudden I found this power that because I was paying the bill, I could actually be in charge of it. And he was a really great guy. He listened to logic. He, we batted backwards and forwards a few times about stuff. And he went, oh, I'll go back to the office and have a look at that.
Yeah.
And the valuations were worth an extra $1 million.
Yeah. We're doing this right now with another property we have that we're revaluing, and we're basically handing over a mini book to the valuer and doing our own research and our own due diligence. And they don't mind that, to be honest with you, because, you know, some of the sales, they might not know if it was off the plan. Like a lot of the off the plan stuff, as an example, is not on realestate.com or on Real Commercial. So they actually got to make phone calls and ring agents and do a lot of deep work. Whereas if you do a lot of that work and you build your case, I always say he or she who has the better documentation usually wins, right?
And I jumped on a plane and went and met the valuer on site.
Yeah. And again, we're not talking, you know, an extra $1,000. We're talking an extra $1 million. You could do a lot of that, right? A lot with that, with the projects that you're doing.
And they weren't the cheapest valuer either. So, yeah.
That's definitely one of the things we've learnt along the way, and Carson is really good at it because he's in the acquisition space and the sales space. And we teach our coaching students that now as well, that it makes such a difference. If you're buying a project, or they're always going to do what a consultant does, which is provide it or give that output, give that information in the safest way possible for them. So they know these valuations are going out to the banks, so they don't want to overshoot it. So the bank rings up and goes, "What are you doing? Like this is rubbish. It's too high." So they're always going to be cautious. But like you said, being there to challenge them and say, "Hey, this one around the corner is on a 6% yield and that one's gone for a 5. Like, what's the difference? How did you end up at a 9?"
Yes.
So it's there.
Also, you do have to check that the valuer is on that bank's panel, especially when we were looking at 2 or 3 different banks.
I'm actually talking to a funder at the moment and introducing him to the valuer, so the valuer could give him the documentation, because I know who the valuer is, to put him on their panel. So they're literally doing that right now, right? So that way, because I know that he's on other funders' panels at the same time.
It sounds like you really want that valuer.
No, he's a good guy. Like he knows a lot of people in the area, right? And this is the importance, right, of doing this stuff, is you learn over time, right? These little tricks. So you've done 8, right? In Townsville. They've doubled them value in 5 years, and I'm not going to dig into how much that value is, because off camera, Robyn likes to keep her cards close to her chest, and we will respect that on camera.
We tried.
What did you do next?
So the Reno flip in Caloundra that I sold for a loss. Oh, my other property developer friends said, "Congratulations." And I went, "Why? I feel awful. It's the first time I've ever made a loss on a property." And they went, "Yeah, we know. But now you're a real developer." It's the first time you made a loss. You guys, stop it.
That's funny.
So, okay. And my accountant told me to get over myself because it was COVID, it was unprecedented, and move on.
We won't judge you.
Yeah, thank you.
You learn a lot.
I fell in a hole. And yeah, so be careful about bashing yourself up. You know, surround yourself with good people that understand what's going on.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I rolled the money into, so one of my lovely photography clients is a real estate agent. Previously, she had bought a block of my units after I'd renovated them. She sold me the block of units, then bought them off me.
Wow.
Because she liked them so much. She stayed as a photography client. She rang me one day and said, "Robyn, you're the only person I can show this house to. It's a hoarder's house and no one else will get it. I can't do an open house on it." So we literally cleared enough space off the kitchen bench to write up a heads of agreement. That was how much space we could get in the whole
We've had a few of those places.
Yeah, I've seen a few videos that Shannon and Carson went through, and some of the findings that they found were quite interesting as well, but we won't dig into that.
Well, I actually made it part of the terms that it had to be cleared. I ended up having to buy a pianola from her because she had no way of shifting it. It was 400 kilograms.
Oh, wow.
So I went, "Fine, here's $500 in cash." So it was like a little sweetener to make it go away. Yes, so I bought it. I have a really good relationship with my team, so town planners. I said, "Do you reckon we can put a duplex on here? I know it's low density res. It's only 550 square meters." And he went, "Yep, as long as we do really clever design." And so we got everything in place, gave her a 3-month contract, which was 2-edged. It gave me breathing space to get out of the deal at Caloundra. And it also gave her room to find somewhere to live because she needed to go to a retirement village. So, yeah, it worked. And
3-month delay or a 3-month due diligence?
No, I had 30 days due diligence because I just needed to make sure the town planning thing would actually stack up. And yeah, so we went unconditional and then gave her 3 months to, so it was unconditional. She could actually go and get a place in a retirement village secured on that 3-month unconditional contract.
During those 30 days due diligence, obviously you're, where do you actually live? As in,
I live at Caloundra.
you live in
Coast.
okay.
Yeah.
So obviously you went from Townsville back to Caloundra. So I'm trying to piece why Caloundra. So that's fine. Yeah.
So I live in Caloundra. I've done properties Brisbane, Toowoomba, Hobart,
Yeah.
Emerald, Townsville.
So that you then got the DA to a duplex.
Yeah,
Right.
so high-end duplex. So it's beachside suburbs, booming. There's a brand new hospital precinct had been built, $200 million worth of medical centres and a hospital, university hospital and a private hospital.
Yep.
So huge demand. But the demand was for high-end. So all the blocks of units that I've owned have been low socio housing,
Yep.
affordable housing, and then I do this weird high-end thing. So I'm on both ends of the market, and you just got to pick your timing on each of them.
What was the big difference between, the more social housing side to then going and building 2 high-end villas? Was it the same consultants that you used? Were they different consultants? How was managing that process? Because you're going from a Hyundai XL to a Ferrari.
Yeah, pretty much. So I always have a motto that it's cheap and cheerful, not cheap and nasty. So it's still got to be well built, but just cheaper products, smaller rooms. They might get 2 carports instead of 2 air-conditioned garages with, pretty stuff on the floor. They're just broomed concrete. So it's a matter of being practical, but they should still be nice to live in.
What did you actually build there?
So 2 beautiful duplexes, so double story, and they were about 250 square meters each, so high rooms, but worked with a building designer who understood duplexes and understood the town plan really well. And then I also work with an interior designer. So Adrian Ramsey. Years ago, I was introduced on the squash courts to an interior designer, and after a game of squash one day, I went, what do you actually do? I love art. I'm into fashion. And so he told me what he did. And he said, we should actually work together on your projects. And I went, how does that work? Because I was clueless. Employing an interior designer sounded very fancy. But it's about space. Like one of the things that he taught me, Peter Gassessa, so his son Mark Gassessa is doing building designing now on the Sunshine Coast. Incredible projects. His father Peter was mentoring me. He taught me space is a luxury. And when you think about that, you go, well, you've got all this space in this room. If we're doing social or affordable housing, we don't have the luxury of space. Everything's got to be very compact. It's got to be a small build price. It's got to be a small print so we can lower the rent rates, so we can lower the sell prices. Whereas the luxury is space. So you might just have a load of space to sit and meditate in a room with not much else in the room, with beautiful dark green paint to calm you. That's a luxury. Yeah. So it was really interesting. So I work with now Adrian. We have so much fun together. I was on his podcast and I think talked much too long.
Well, there was a big smile, I must admit, when you said I got to work with an interior designer. Smile from ear to ear came out there.
Yeah, so he challenges me. He knows I'm pretty bold with my fashion and my colors. And so the last place he said to me, so Robyn, are we going to just paint this white and grey like everyone else? And I went, no, stop it. You're just annoying me by saying that. And so one side we actually painted in green tones. The other side we painted in blue tones. And he kind of has this theory of make it so polarizing that people will either not like it or they'll fall in love with it and pay you a premium.
Yeah.
And that's a high end.
Yeah. You remind me of my wife. We just did something similar in a build that we've just moved into. And is definitely bold, and it's either you like it or you don't like it.
Yeah.
But I think that's what the uniqueness comes from. And the same thing, I think that's when somebody will come in and fall in love with it and then and pay a premium for it. So did you retain those or did you sell those?
Sold them. And so the first one sold quite quickly for a good price. The second one sat, and it was coming up to Christmas. And there was a lady who said, I want to buy it, but I need to sell my place. And so I said to the agent, sign it up, subject to her selling. It's over Christmas. Things go pretty quiet. I was going on a month's holiday. See what happens. So I could see, a week before I was coming home that she hadn't sold her place. No movement whatsoever. I said to the agent, book an appointment with her when I come back. I want to inspect her house. And it was a lovely family home, 5-bedroom home, 3 bathrooms on the hill in Caloundra, beautiful views to the north. I couldn't work out why it wasn't selling. It was either overpriced or there was something wrong that you couldn't see in the photos. And sure enough, got there. I'd done all my research on the plane, on the way home, and went, okay, so here's the price range. So it should be sitting 1.1 to 1.3. And she was asking 1.3. There was nowhere to go with it. And I got there. And what you can't see in the photos is the pool was completely brown. None of the finishing had been done. So she'd done a renovation, but never finished anything. None of the skirting boards were sealed.
Oh, wow.
There was a floating timber floor, an expensive floating timber floor, but it hadn't been sealed or finished. Just stuff that people would start picking at that was wrong. And so I said to the agent, I'll do a swap. I'll take it as part payment. But it's not worth 1.3. So I'm pretty creative.
I love it.
My photography creativity skills kick in all sorts of ways. And I said, but it's only worth 1.1. And he said, would you pay 1.1? And I went, yes. I went, oh, nuts. I think I've just bought a house. So the duplex was worth 1.9. So she paid me a bunch of cash. We swapped. And so then inadvertently I got a house to renovate or finish all the renovations. And I did that in 6 weeks, put it back on the market and got 1.3 for it because that was still the price range in that suburb. You can't invent a new price in that suburb for the same house. And I made $15,000 out of it.
Nothing a bit of paint and a bit of blue food coloring in a pool. Yeah.
We had to completely drain the pool and resurface it. Yeah.
With the other duplexes, so I think you did another DA and did you just sell it with a DA approval in that suburb? Because I know a lot of people started doing like that, kind of caught on to what you're doing in those areas. I know a number of people that went in there did duplexes. Yeah. When did you see the writing on the wall to go, okay, this isn't going to work here anymore?
So that's a great question. Just when I'd sold the second one, I had already bought the next site. And as prices started to really escalate on land prices, because people go, oh, we can build a duplex on all of these. So I was buying the blocks of land for $750, but now all of a sudden the blocks of land were 1.1, 1.2. Well, there's your profit.
Yep.
It's gone. If you make any mistake, your profit is gone. And so on the second one, because I could see the market getting a bit soft, interest rate rises started to kick in. And the builders were all getting scratchy. They were all falling over from COVID, all the hangover stuff of fixed contracts. And I was getting nervous also about appointing a builder that I wanted to know had the legs to get it through the project. And so I agreed on the same builder coming with me for the next one. He pulled out. Right. So literally, here's the pivotal moment again. I had booked the demolition for Monday. So when you actually demolish a house, you don't just get the power disconnected. You actually have to have it abolished, which most people don't know. So they actually have to come along and pull the power line off the house and abolish the power. I'd already had the power abolished. The demolition was booked for Monday, and the builder told me that he was pulling out of the build contract. Oh, but you can't. Like, we've agreed, we've signed, and I went, ugh. You don't ever want to push someone into a place where they don't want to be.
Agreed.
It's not going to end well. And so I actually rang up the demolition this time and said, don't demolish the house, because if we have to actually sell a livable house, it was just a little 3-bedroom brick box. It could have been rented or sold.
Correct.
I went, right, I should just settle down for a bit. So rang the building designer. Have got any other builders that have got a space in their schedule? So it took another 6 months to actually get a builder, because we had the DA and everything ready to go. But there was that weird pricing thing. No one wanted to actually pay me the extra $200,000 that it cost to get the DA. They still just wanted to pay me land value. I went, may as well build it myself for that. So went ahead and built it. But I knew the market would be softer than the last lot. So in the first street that I built in Bocarina, by the time I was finished, there were 7 more duplexes approved or getting built. And I got out just in time, went down to the next suburb, which was Watala. And by the time I finished that build, there were 27 duplexes getting built or sold in those 3 suburbs. So weekly, as I come to the end of my build, I would go to every open house of every duplex. I would track every build, every sale price. I knew how big every bedroom was. I knew what didn't they do? What did they do? How do I do this differently? And so made about half the profit from the first duplex. And I went, right, time to go do something else.
But that's the work. Oh, sorry, Shane.
You go, mate.
That's the work, though, a lot of people don't do. They just they talk to the agent. The agent says, I can still get you that 1.8 or 1.7. But actually being an area expert, doing the work, boots on ground, walking through the other townhouses going, crap, these guys aren't getting 1.7 and this is nice, and having that, not that optimism where you're just blindly hoping that you're going to, just jag that nice price, and being conservative. I think that's where you can hopefully get ahead of the piece. And also, like you said, you're aware that all these approvals were coming in and you're able to, pivot, because a lot of people just keep doing the same thing over and over and the margins just get squeezed and they wonder why they don't make any money. We do the same thing with land, where we'll physically walk every single block that's been sold in the last, 18 months in that area and what's on the market now, because, a 600 square meter block and a 600 square meter one could have 5 meters fall and one could be flat, and you're doing your comparables on the flat block, but yours has got a few meters fall on it. It's just all those little nuances that you got to be, you need to know more than the agent at the end of the day. So,
because aerial photos are a bit deceiving. And unless you so another of my golden rules is always physically go and look.
Yeah, I bought a property once in Roma, actually. And I did really well out of it, but I never even seen it. Never even went there. Didn't know the area or anything, but just got introduced to it and I did well, but I would never do it again. That's the only property that I've ever bought that I've never touched and felt. And yeah, it's one of those things. I was just listening to another very successful real estate agent that is now setting up a division overseas, and he was walking the streets in the country going like, you cannot beat walking the streets, seeing the types of cars that are in the streets, how wide are the streets, the different types of people walking in the streets, the maturity of the trees and all these things that adds a lot to dollar values on properties. Because I've been looking at properties at the moment in different areas here on the Gold Coast, and there's so much difference in price from one to the other. But on the photo, I'm like, it looks so similar. How can one be $1 million more? That is just 8 streets on the other side. But once you start understanding the area and the location and the proximity to things, you start realizing why that demand is there. Shannon, you were
like you said, literally being on a busier street, more traffic on it that you don't know about unless you don't visit it and go and see, can make hundreds of thousands to the bottom line. But just a question for you. It's probably a better question towards the end, but for the listeners, how are you funding these projects? Like how are you working through those? Like going through COVID, builders didn't have fixed rate contracts then, and quite a hard time to lend as well. How were you managing that?
Good question. So I like to talk. You probably worked that out. Yeah. I will talk to anyone and everyone. And about 10 years ago, my husband wanted to buy a hangar at Caloundra Airport. And So we went down the row of hangars. Has anyone got anyone for sale? No. And there's small businesses operating out of these hangars, or their planes stored there. And so Ross wanted to bring in planes from the USA, and he needed a hangar. And we got down to the very last hangar, and it was the only one that had any interest that, yes, might be able to sell it. And so we met with Peter, and we agreed on a price because he was in his 70s and was thinking he should start offloading some stuff. And we agreed, but he didn't want to sell because his current tenant hadn't paid his rent for about 18 months. And Peter, wealthy local businessman, doesn't like giving away money. I understand that.
Naturally.
Worked hard for it. And he was kind of keeping the tenant there because the tenant was keeping him on the hook and saying, no, don't get rid of me. I'll pay the rent. I'll catch it up. And so Ross had to go to America to the aircraft conference. And I said, leave negotiations with me. I'm sure I can sort this. And so I had a cup of tea with Peter, and I got very creative and said to him, how much is the amount of rent that this guy owes you? I think it was $28,000 or something. And I went, okay, leave that with me. I'll see what we can do. And so I rang Ross and I said, I'm going to propose if we offer Peter another $28,000 to pay his rent, we'll take over the tenant. And Ross was going, why would we pay more than we should? I went, do you want the one hangar that's available or not? And so, okay. And so I went back to Peter, had a cup of tea with him. That age group need a cup of tea for negotiations. And I said, this is what we're proposing. We'll take over the tenant. We'll pay you the rent. We'll recoup what we can. And his eyes lit up. And so we ended up having this, he agreed, and ended up having a lovely conversation about what's been his history. And he was a long-time property developer.
Oh, yeah.
And I went, oh, what do you do? What this? How do you fund your deals? And he said, oh, now my sons are all doing property deals. And he said, I just fund them at 2% more than whatever the current going rate is. And I went, cool, can I be family? And it was kind of a throwaway line. But after we did the hangar deal, that all worked well. And then one day another deal came up. And I'm always looking at least 3 or 4 things at a time because one of them will come off. One day, 3 of them came off at the same time. And I went, oh, crap, what do I do now? So I said to Ross, should I have a cup of tea with Peter? What do you think? He went, you can only ask. So I emailed him because I went, it's easier to say no by email than across the table. And he said, no, we'll have a cup of tea. So we had a cup of tea and I went, okay, blah, blah, blah. And he went, and of course I'd printed them each out on a nice little, I always have my piece of paper. And he went, let's do this one. Okay. And it was 350 grand, little dot of a thing in Nambour. It was going to be 6 weeks in, out. And I went, cool. You get first mortgage because it's your money. Yeah. And it was always just so hard going back to the bank every time. I had a line of credit, but you always had to, every couple of years, justify the whole thing. And I went, there has to be a better way. And so he agreed. And so it was 2% higher than the local rate. I was family. And he didn't want a first mortgage, even though I offered it to him. He said, no, well, a piece of paper never saved a deal, never saved a marriage, never saved a relationship. And I went, oh, okay. There's some stories here. Okay, I understand where you're coming from, but I would like 1 page. So we agreed on a 1-page agreement. And so for 10 years, we've been using 1-page agreements if I need something in and out. And it's been a really valuable resource.
And
that's awesome.
And this is like, we discuss this all the time, right? Like there's so much money out there to be deployed. You just got to find the right money. And there's so many more Peters that are out there. And I'm meeting more and more of these types of Peters. And I know Shannon and Carson have been meeting plenty of Peters over the years to help out in this way. A lot of people just straight away, I can't afford it. I don't have enough money. I mean, the banks, the Westpacs and NABs and Commonwealth banks aren't going to fund me. And they just stop there.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a reason why we have under our caps idea, capital, execution, because it doesn't mean you're all 3. right? Like you're the person with the idea at the time. Peter was the one with the capital, and you got the deal done. Peter's happy because he's earning more than what he's going to have in his savings account.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
And he gets to have cups of teas with lovely ladies and have a chat. And I'm sure you've heard about all those traumas over the years now, and all those stories about the one pagers, why they didn't work for him. And you keep building that relationship up, right? Like we have someone here live watching the podcast today. Her name's Jo, and she's a coaching client of ours, and she's just got her first deal underway. And talking to her off camera, she's like, me and my husband were doing it, and we're paying for this, and it's a bit nerve wracking, and but we think we had got a really good site, and the money will come if needed. If they can't fund it, as an example, the money will come. The Peters will be out there, or the Shannons and Erics or Carsons or whoever that may be. And that's one thing. I'm so glad you asked that question, Shannon, because it's very, very important to not restrict yourself that you don't have the money to do something. Now, like, give you an idea, that little $350,000 one in them, or like, how much money would you have made out of that deal? Just that one deal, if you don't mind.
I think it was like 60 grand.
Right, 60 grand.
Yeah.
But because you've paid 2% more, which was already built into the fee, so it's like, who cares about the 2% if you know you're going to make the 60?
Yeah.
Like someone works, some people work a year to make 60 grand.
But you can see, Robyn, clearly it's the thinking outside the box. You're that asking for that coffee and seeing what everyone can't see. Like most people would have just been, okay, subject to sale of the house, didn't work out. They wouldn't have even thought, and you didn't make a heck of a lot of money on that house, but it also got the sale in a difficult market for your duplex.
I got top price on it.
Yeah, and so you've made the money there where you could have actually lost, sold it for an extra 100, 200 grand less, and people just aren't thinking outside the box. And so having that creative flair is clearly why you've been successful. And that's what we do as well with dirt. It's just like we see the bush and everyone's like, they can't envision what it can look like. And that's where obviously the creative side of you, then back to the beginning of the story, in property development is if you can get it right, you can cash in insane.
So I use my creativity everywhere that I possibly can. So in the morning I go, what color do I need to wear today? What's going to give me energy? Who am I talking to? What do I need to say? And to the color of the properties, to how do I communicate with the agent? So recently I was negotiating on a deal and I thought it was well overpriced by at least $500,000. But I said to the agent, so how did the vendors come up with that value? Because you don't want to ever blame the real estate agent and have him on the back foot for overpricing it, knowing full well it was probably them that did overprice it. So I always try to use my creativity in every area of my life. And then I'll sit there and have a conversation with myself and go, oh, that didn't work. How could have I said that better next time? Yeah.
As the saying goes, right? Like the quality of your life is the quality of your questions, right?
Yeah.
The question I have is, what's Peter's mobile number? That make really good tea.
Yeah. And interestingly, Peter, along the way, because I can actually draw my own plans. And he went, who's drawing your plans? And I went, well, I use, obviously, a professional designer, but I will often start with a sketch. Or I'll take a reno plans and I'll start drawing. And it turns out his son is actually a designer.
Wow.
And he went, would you mentor him? And I went, for sure. So the next deal, I said to Mark, okay, next deal starting this day, blah, blah. And so 10 days go past and I didn't hear from Mark. And he goes, oh, can I bring my trailer around on Saturday and help? And I went, you can come, you can bring coffee. Why are you bringing your trailer? And he went, well, to help with the demolition. I went, we did that on day one. I worked pretty quickly, but come. So anyhow, we've now formed a really good working relationship with Mark, and he's now also investing sometimes, depending on what the deal is. And now Mark is also building his own duplexes. So that's been paid forward really nicely. And also, I always knew that they had like 10 of them, but I was never part of that. I knew Peter and Mark, but and I knew who they all were because some of them were local plumbers that I've used, but not in their clique. And then last year I got invited in, and I was very proud of that moment. And so they were doing a subdivision in Toowoomba. They'd bought a block that already had a DA on it, and they went back to council and got a huge uplift in the reconfiguration. And it was going to be a 2.5 years deal, as you guys know. And they thought they would just test the market, put it back out to market with the uplift, and came back to us all and they said, oh, we're actually just going to take the money and resell it. So we got our money back in 8 months instead of 2.5 years. Yeah, didn't make the full profit, but there was no risk attached.
Sometimes just getting the money off the table is the best decision.
Yeah.
Those couple of Toowoomba deals that you did, that unit block and the approval, you obviously you renovated those and then did a bit of an approval for, was it a duplex out the back, or was so once again stacking strategies? Or
Stacking strategies for sure. So 2 street frontage, 5 flats at the front. So I call them a flat when they're not strata titled. So they're a unit when they have their own title. So there were 5 flats on the front of the block, big driveway, vacant block of land, and a really silly crappy road down the back. And I'd owned them for a number of years. So some of them I just buy and hold for when they're positive cash flow, because there's 5 of them. And we had actually let out the whole 5 to a social housing company. So I'm passionate about helping where I can. And so they head leased the whole lot. So they have people coming and going in emergency crisis and all sorts of stuff. We don't ask any questions. They just pay us and we look after the property. And yeah, so then it takes about $200,000 in 2 years to subdivide the back block of land off. So we had to bring power from the front street. I should draw a diagram. Can you see this? So 2 streets, block of land, flats down here. So we had to bring NBN down here and power in a separate trench, because you can't put them in the same trench anymore.
It's almost like a battle axe kind of block.
Yeah, but there's full, yeah.
Yeah.
And so then we subdivided this. Then we had to bring stormwater and drainage from this street down here, tunnel under the street and over to here.
Wow.
And then we had to bring sewage from this block to here and then back to here. So 2 years and $200,000, and finally got titles, got approvals. And then I said to the agent, right, do we need to start a title all of these? We check the pricing. And so we found out the market had jumped quite a bit, that I didn't actually have to start a title them. We could get the same price selling all 5 of them to an investor as if I had started title them. They were the same price. So why spend more money and more time to get no more uplift? So we actually notified all the tenants that 1 week we would be coming in and painting, 1 week we'd be coming in and doing all new taps and fittings, 1 week we'd be coming in, and right at the end, because Toowoomba has red dirt everywhere, bless Toowoomba, beautiful gardens, red dirt. So we waited till everything was completely finished and then gave them all new carpet.
Yep.
And the tenants were all in there during that process. And so we just made sure we notified them all the time about any driveway works, got their cars out early in the morning for them. And we also kept all of the income while all of that was happening.
Wow.
It sounds like you're a very good communicator,
I try to be.
because like just communicating obviously with your, JV partners, and communicating with, real estate agents and valuers and tenants. And you seem like you'd be very good at negotiating and communicating kind of win-win situations. Do you feel like that's a big part of some of your success?
I try to be a collaborator. So often, like when you said, can I have Peter's phone number? But often I'm out and I'll go, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so. And so I just get my phone out and send them an introduction. And because it's like, where do the dots of life lead? This led to that, led to that, led to this, led to... I have no idea where these dots of life will lead to next.
I'm a big believer, because I'm a big collaborator as well, and do the exact same thing on what you just discussed. And I think that's what's led to a lot of the successes I've had and the people that I've met over time, is just putting yourself out there and just putting out good energy and helping. right? Not for
Yeah.
getting something in return every single time. Just going out there, showing up. At times you might forget a couple things or an email or something like that. But in general, just going out there and doing good things and being, I think there's a level of confidence, right? Like I got a message from a guy on Instagram with like a site, and I'm like, hey, thanks for sending this through. Really appreciate it. Are you coming to the event? And he's like, oh, no, I know. I love real estate and I'd love to have a crack, but you could just see that he was lacking that confidence of just being in a room or picking up a phone and discussing an issue or asking a question. It could be a very stupid question, but just ask the question. I was with someone on the weekend, and they're looking at the property development space, and they're actually coaching clients of ours as well. And he's like, yeah, I'm just a bit, like a bit overwhelmed, and there's a lot of things going on and stuff. And I'm like, well, I recommend you speaking to a town planner, right? Just pay for 2 hours, go there with the stupidest questions, right? That you don't know. Just go there, paying for the time, and get a little bit of clarity, because there's a lot of stuff to know, as an example. But like just taking action is so key to anything. Like Joe being here today, like she took action and goes, you know what, I'm just going to come in and listen to the pod because Carson thought this would be a good pod for me to listen to, and there's synergies between you and her maybe, and who knows, right? Maybe it's Peter that funds Joe, as an example. You just don't know how those thoughts are going to be connected. And I think the purpose of it is you shouldn't know.
No.
Right. Just go out there and do good. And I feel like when you came in here today, just your energy, I could feel just such good energy from you when you entered. It's like it's a soft energy, but it doesn't surprise me at the amount of success that you've had to date, and all the success I'm sure you'll have moving forward in the future, because we have a lot of these podcasts booked in. And I was like, Carson, tell me a little bit more about Robyn, and who's Robyn and why is she coming on the podcast, as an example. And as soon as he started saying who you are and what you've done, and being on the stages and stuff like that, things get very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And that's why we do what we do, is we create these podcasts not to just put out random content and try and get as many views as possible and get paid big money by YouTube and all this stuff. It's literally to give inspiration and hope to people on the other end that actually are listening and spending the time, rather than watching another Netflix show that's not going to change their life, or listening to the radio for that same song that they've listened to 100 times over. It's bringing people like yourself on that can actually help them make change within these 6 inches in their head, because that's where it all starts.
Absolutely. But also, nothing actually beats doing. So people say to me, oh, you bought, 8 shops. How do I get into that? And I go buy 2 shops. Go buy 3 shops. Don't buy something big. Like, have you ever renovated before? Well, buy a little house and renovate it. Find out what you don't know, because until it's your money on the line and your energy on the line, it's all just theory.
I got one question. And if you guys have any other questions, because we're going to wrap this up soon, is how do you overcome the fear? Because I talk to a lot of people that are, whether they're coaching clients, friends, acquaintances, people learning about property development and property investment. And one big word that comes out all the time is, I'm scared.
Yeah.
Right. I'm fearful, because everyone knows someone that's went bankrupt because of a deal, or an uncle or an auntie or whatever it is. How do you manage that in your mind? That because no matter what deal you sign, when you sign, there's a level of anxiety and the stomach turns, and it's like, you know what? I hope this all goes well. Right.
Yeah.
Because there's so much out of our control. You could do the feasibility, you can work the numbers, it can tell you blue in the face it's the best deal in the world, but you can't control COVID, you can't control nature, you can't control GFCs and these types of things. So how do you manage that?
So risk mitigation. So lots of strategies into one deal. Like, there's just not in and out, as we were talking about earlier, but also to quantify. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. when I was 22, like the accountants that I work with, I'd gone back to them and said, how should I have my structure? How should I set this up? And at 20, they told me I needed a family trust. Now, to me, a family trust is weird. I'm 20. Don't you need a family trust when you have a family? And so he, explained how it works for asset protection. And he actually set me up with my own self-managed super fund at 20. I have this beautiful paper document, which is literally falling apart because it's so old now, but it's still my self-managed super fund. So stuff like that at times has saved my thinking, because I go, I've got this nest egg over here. If all of this goes pear-shaped, this can't be touched. So there's always a backup. There's always, and one deal should never be your undoing. So one time I went and bid on a property that I couldn't actually see inside because it was the body corporate selling it to recoup their body corporate fees. And so you couldn't see inside, but I could see the block of units, blah, blah. Anyhow, went to the courthouse auction, put my hand up, bought it. I had pre-organized finance. I can bid to this level and I can get this much finance. Anyhow, I rang up the banker and went, okay, I bought it for this much. Yay. Let's get it on the road. 30 days to settle. Oh, cool. So next ring, she rings me up and she goes, we need a valuer to come out. And I went, can't get a valuer in it. It's locked. Can't see inside it until the day I pay for it and get the keys. Can't give you finance if we can't get valuation. So that's when you learn to pivot really quickly. Like, where can I get this cash from? And Uncle Peter, he goes, so you want half a large one? He was on the golf course chatting to me. And I went, yes, is that possible? 30 days, would that be all right? Oh no, we're now under 26 days counting. But yeah, so have strategies of what if this doesn't work? What if this doesn't sell for this price? So if I couldn't sell it for 1.9, the second lot I couldn't sell for 1.9. I had to take 1.7, but there's still profit in it because I anticipated the market softening.
Yeah.
And be prepared to jump when you need to jump. And it's your gig. Like, if you've got to meet a tradie there at 6 o'clock in the morning because that's the only time they can meet you there, swing your legs out of bed at 5 and be there with a coffee for them at 6 o'clock to meet them.
Yep.
To do whatever it takes.
That's awesome. The last one I want to unpack quickly is your storage, because obviously you had your deals where you're making some good money on some of these little projects, which is great. But then obviously cash flow is where we get our lifestyle from. So you've got your commercial property and you've got your storage one. In your little brief, you said you got a decent $500,000 uplift. How did that come about? Why did you buy it? And how did you get that uplift?
So in order to fund my charity project, I actually need more income. Because it takes a lot of money. You've either got to be a fundraiser, which I'm not, or I want to build stuff. And so to keep a charity going, you've got to fund it. And so I thought, I wonder if I can buy something with cash flow that then I can apportion the profit to the charity. So that's what I did. And so, yes, storage sheds, they were very run. I literally had them managed. They only had 55% occupancy. They were filthy, and they had a good security system, but it was backing up to nowhere and no one was even looking at it. So I went in, actually got it backing up to somewhere, put in some automated systems, put in automated gates, got a good manager. And so we have already pretty much filled it, and it is now positive cash flow. And yeah, I know that sounds very simple. It's a lot of work.
Solve your problems.
It's a lot of work, and you have to get your hands dirty and go sort it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is manufacturing equity 101, this podcast. Like, there's so many different things that you've done. It's not like I'm just an expert and I build duplexes, or I'm just a builder and I build low-income housing. Like, you have done a little bit of everything from subdivision to, retail shops, commercial, high-end penthouse renos. And I just want to take my hat off to you and say, well done. Because I I have 2 daughters, right? And I look at them and I'm just like, I want them to have the confidence to do something with their life moving forward in the future. And I look at you and I just the energy that you have, and like if I can instill a little bit of that into them, I think they're going to be set up for success, especially being women in this industry, such a male dominated industry, and seeing women like yourself and Joe, who's sitting here watching this, going out there and doing this kind of thing is amazing to see. And I want to interview more women and bring more women on the panel to give other women, because usually women listen to women, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't do anything because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
I do it because I want to do it.
Yeah.
I do think it's tougher being a female. Like I saw a trail of emails one day from one of my team, and they went, I just happened to scroll down, and they went, she doesn't seem to know what she wants. And I went, oh, hang on a minute. They wouldn't say that about a guy.
It's a thing, right?
They'd go, hey, mate, you
Yeah.
need to do such and such. But they won't say that to me. So I went, okay. I didn't say that I'd seen it. I just set up an appointment 2 weeks out, invited all the consultants to the one meeting in the one boardroom, turned up in my suit. And I went, so I sent them the agenda and said, we need to resolve these issues and I need you all together to collaborate. So by the time I got there, they'd pretty much sorted it and we could just keep moving forward. But if I'd have made a song and dance about being a female or doing treatment like this, blah, 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 it's not going to get you any brownie points.
Yeah.
Just know that I have different skills. Like every one of my tradies, I know their partners' names. I know their kids' names. Like my tradie in Townsville last week, he said to me, so Robyn, what do you actually do? I'm like, oh, interesting question. Well, I do photography, I do fashion, I do property. He went, oh, my wife wants to meet you. Why, what does she do? Oh, she does wearable art. And I went, oh, cool. You know, my friend and I have just been named as finalists in the Australian Wearable Art Awards. So while I'm in Townsville, I have coffee with her.
Yeah.
She's into photography. Like it's all this just, you need to be personal and get to know people.
Yeah. Again, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And I love hearing about all your success and looking forward to, I think we're going to have a coffee after this down at the cafe, which will be cool. So we can actually hear some of the numbers that you don't want to talk about, so I can actually see how rich you actually are. No, hi, Joe. No, yeah, really appreciate it. Joe, thank you so much for coming as well. We've got Joe here. She's a coaching client. First time meeting her face to face. And yeah, she's just got her first deal over the line, which is quite amazing. Very active in the community. Appreciate your guys' attention. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.